ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So we are on our topic, what we call insensible and unintelligible. We were talking about in last session, we were talking about sadhana, and we talked about Sankhya. That is, Sankhya tells us that you are already Brahm. You don't need to do anything. You just need to realize that you are the Brahm, and then the divinity will start taking shape in yourself. Then we have another, fundamental philosophy called yoga, in which they say that you need to do sadhana. And then, of course, Patanjali Yoga Sutra has given a eightfold path, that how you purify yourself and then how you reach the state of asana, dhyan, dharana, and samadhi. Before that, you have to do the purification, self purification through niyam and certain other practices. So these are the two fundamental paths. There are, of course, mixed paths as well, but two fundamental paths, that is Gyan and Karma. Now we also discussed about the ramification of Karma, that Karma is not a one-time event, it's a continuing process. Now we'll talk a little bit more about Karma today before we go further on this topic. Now Karma, why do we do Karma? We do Karma because we feel that we need something. We need something means we are not complete, we are not purna. When we say this sloka, Purnamada Purnamidam, it means we are not purna. That's why we do karma. Those who consider themselves purna, they don't have to do any karma because the karma is not needed by them. So purna, the feeling of a purna actually provokes karma. And that is how everybody starts doing karma. Now, another part of our life which we are often mistaken is that we are living a life. From the birth right up to the death, we consider it as a flow of life, Jivan ka pravah. But actually, this is a flow of death. Because from birth, as soon as you are born, the flow of death starts. The life starts decaying day by day. And finally, at the time of death, it comes to an end. So what we call it, it's actually flow of death, not that of life. But, it's not a big thing. We can interpret it either way. We can say it is life, but some people can say it is the flow of death. Now, why I'm saying this thing? Because of another reason. The reason is that the main purpose of human life is to rise upwards. When the water, we put water anywhere, it goes downwards. It finds its own level, the level of the ocean. It continues to flow downwards. But in order to make the water rise, we have to heat it up, and then it converts into what we call steam, and then it goes up in the sky. So an effort is needed to raise the life upwards. So that is what we need to do. This prerogative is available only to human being, because other species of life, animals and birds and all other species of life, they do not have this prerogative. Their mental faculties are limited. Their mind and intellect have severe limitations, and therefore they follow a set pattern of life. They don't go too much down and they don't go too much high. They are primarily guided by the what we call survival instincts. So that is what guides their life. But human being is privileged in the sense that we can raise our level to a new high, but at the same time, we can also bring our level to a new low. That potential exists in human being. For example, this practice basically that when you are born as a child, at the time of your death, you should be far more elevated. Your consciousness should be much higher than what it was at the time of your birth. But actually, in 99% cases, if you observe a child's, I would say, level of uh, consciousness is higher than that of an old man, because there has been generally a decay in our level of consciousness in human life. There are very, very few cases when the consciousness rises. You can compare a child who is far more innocent than a person at the end of his fag end of his life. He becomes obstinate, he develops all kinds of anxieties. I have seen people who behave in a very erratic fashion after 60, 70, 80 years of age. I'm sure you must have seen that. It's because they have not been able to raise their consciousness to a higher level. And that is why I am calling it a prava of death. Because at the time of our birth, we are having a higher consciousness, and then slowly we go down, down, down. At the time of our death, our consciousness goes down. And that is why it is what we can call it mrityu ka pravah rather than jivan ka pravah. If we really call it Jivan Ka Pravah, it means we have to rise. Our consciousness should go up. Our knowledge level should go up. Our inner understanding should go up. Our thinking process, our meditation should be much more concentrated and much more, inward oriented. So this is the process which we have to adopt if we do a sadhana. So if we do a sadhana, the first thing we have to realize that this kind of sadhana is possible only in human life. Human life is a gift. In our, lot of scripture, there are references that even devtas want to come on this earth in the human life. Even God's incarnation has come as human life on this earth. So human life is a great privilege to be in, and we have that privilege. Now, to use this privilege in the right direction, we have to rise upwards. That should be the approach in the life. The word Kundalini is used very often. We talked about this when we were talking about, various chakras in the body. Now, Kundalini basically means that your energy is going upwards. The energy which is there in the Mooladhara, that has to go upwards. It has to go to Sahasrahara, or right at the top of your, tip of your head. Now, that raising of that energy upwards requires certain effort. And that is what yoga sadhana tells us. So it is not my purpose here to go into the process of yoga sadhana, but the purpose is to tell that as human being, we should make an effort to raise our consciousness higher and higher and higher. Otherwise, our life will not be life. It will be a flow of towards death. It will be flow towards going downwards, not upwards. So this is one thing we must understand. The spiritual process is designed to help us to raise our consciousness to a new height. And that is why we understood what is insensible and what is unintelligible. Because insensible and unintelligible are the things which we cannot easily understand, because we are engaged engaged in the visible, tangible world all the time. And that world is the one which is taking us downwards in the spiral, downwards all the time. If we want to rage, we have to understand this insensible and unintelligible world, which is actually a vast majority of the entire universe. So this is a small linkage I wanted to make why we need to understand unintelligible and insensible, because that is the direction in which we have what is known, we have to go to unknown. What is visible and tangible, we have to move from there to the thing which is intangible, which is invisible. Because the spiritual path tells us that that is far more powerful than the things which are tangible, which we also understood, as I gave you an example, that everything in our life begins where? It begins in intangible form. It begins in your mind as a thought, which is intangible, which is insensible. And then that thought process goes down and gets converted into the action. Because the thought converts into will, or thought converts into desire, desire into will into action, and action becomes life. So everything originates from that so-called insensible and then goes to the sensible. And therefore, in order to understand the life, in order to understand the flow of life, we have to understand that insensible. We have to understand that invisible. We have to understand that intangible from where everything originates. And that is what I wanted to mention, that if we want to consider our life as a flow of life, then we need to follow this particular path of raising our consciousness, where we become stronger to understand the invisible. Visible anybody can understand. It's tangible, visible, you can see. Those people who can rise beyond tangible, beyond visible, and start understanding invisible, there is an achievement, there is a rise in the consciousness. To discover the truth, that is how we have to move. So this is one point which I wanted to make. And to illustrate that point, I'll give you one example. At the time of our death, what happens? We have a tangible body. We have 70, 80, 90 kilo of weight of the body. We have consciousness. At the time of death, the consciousness leaves first. And then this 80, 90 kilo of weight of the body is consigned to fire, as per the Hindu traditions. And that fire consumes all that. And it becomes again intangible, invisible. You use 80 kilo of the weight of the body, and maybe you use 100 to 200 kilo of wood to consume that fire. That almost 300 kilo of weight reduces to small little ash. If you weigh that ash which is left over at the end of the entire cremation process, you will realize that that whole 300 kilo has been diluted to maybe 1 kilogram or 2 kilogram of weight. Where did the rest go? Where did it go? This is visible to us. We can sense it every day. When you go to a Shamshan Ghat and somebody is dead, you see it yourself. That where does it disappear? It disappeared to the so-called insensible, unintelligible era of the universe. The part which is insensible, unintelligible, it goes there. And then it comes back from there again. So everything which is tangible comes from there. It disappears there at the end of the life. It comes from there. I gave you an example of a tree, or even our own example. And you you have crop in a field. You have, say, 10 biga land to yourself. Now that 10 biga land has been with you for generations. Your grandfather, your great grandfather also cultivated there. Your father cultivated, and now you are cultivating. And you have been cultivating that land, and every year you take out, say, maybe 30 tons of output from there. Now, where does that output come from? The land is there as it is, it has not diminished. Even scientists have done some experiments. The land has not diminished. Even a few kilogram is not lost. That weight in the form of crop, it again comes from that invisible, intangible, insensible, unintelligible part of the universe. You may call it photosynthesis or whatever scientific name you want to give, it doesn't matter. But a small little seed which doesn't even weigh 1 gram will convert into a huge tree weighing, say, 500 kilograms or maybe 5 tons or maybe even more. So we can see that everything comes from the invisible, insensible, and everything goes back to invisible, insensible. In between, there is a little bit of journey which is in the tangible, which is in the sensible, which is in the part which we can grasp with our sense organs. So that small journey is cannot be very important. The more important is the one from where we originate and where we end up. So this is what we call Naswar and Saswat. The process of this journey is Naswar. It originates at one point and disappears at one point. But the origin from where it comes, that invisible, intangible, that is Saswat. That exists all the time. From where it comes and where it goes. So this is what we need to understand from our debate in the last 3 sessions, that everything comes from the intangible and insensible and unintelligible and goes back there. In between there is a transition, which is we call life, but actually that is not life, that is the journey of death in a certain way. If you look at it holistically, the life is before the real birth and life is after the birth. This is only a journey towards death. But whatever name we give doesn't matter. We can call it the journey of life. It is not significant. Significant is that this particular journey allows us to rise in our consciousness. We have seen that every human being has a different level of consciousness. Therefore, the gradation is already there. We are not equal. We are not made equal. And the socialist theories tell us that human being can be made equal and should be made equal. Everything evil comes because of inequality. It is not entirely true. Maybe there are certain evils added because of inequality, but the fact is that we are made unequal. We are unequal. Our level of consciousness, which we assume at the time of our birth, is different for each one of us. And then we can raise that level or we can reduce that level to a lower level. That depends on our own journey of life, on our own action, on our own understanding of life. So the purpose of this particular thing is that we have to understand this fact that everything originates from the so-called insensible, unintelligible. Then we get a journey and then we end up again back in the same unintelligible part. But in that journey, we get a chance to raise our consciousness. And that is what we can do only in human life. Other lives do not give that chance, and therefore we are privileged. We should think about it and we should use that opportunity to raise our consciousness in this lifetime, because that will make us rise again in this world at a higher level of consciousness. If we come back here, will come back at a higher level. And then uh, we can continue that journey further. As Krishna has said in one of the early chapters, I think chapter 3 or 4, that whatever good or bad karma you do, they remain intact and they become part of your seed in the next life. And that is what happens to us. So, this is one thing we have to do. Second thing. Second thing is that what do we want in life? Can we reflect upon it once in a deeper sense? We want happiness. We want to be peaceful. I think peaceful and happiness, these are the two words which will characterize our meditation on this issue. Because whatever we do, why do we do that? For example, why do we collect wealth? We collect wealth because we feel that it will lead to happiness. Why do we collect or try to gain power? We try to gain power because we feel it will lead to happiness. So similarly, whatever effort we do in our life, I think they are driven by happiness and peace. Even peace is part of the happiness, because when you are peaceful, you are happy. So these are two interconnected. Actually, there's a word which has been used in Sanskrit called Anand. Anand is one word which has no opposite, because that is one state which has no, what you call antonym or synonym, no antonym. Happiness can be converted into unhappiness or distress. Peace can be converted into disturbance. But Anand has no such word. So once we reach that state of, then, you are completely blessed. You are perpetually peaceful and happy. And that is what the purpose of life is. If we think deep, we will find that is the only purpose we are looking for. We are purposely finding happiness and peace in our life. And all our efforts are driven towards that. Now, problem is that those very efforts which we are driving for peace and happiness are causing unhappiness, are the cause of all the distress we get into. Now, those, I can call them into 2-3 categories. One is the desires. Desires, when they are fulfilled, gives you happiness, but when they are not fulfilled, they cause you distress. Similarly, one desire fulfilled gives birth to many more desires. It's a geometric progression. And therefore, you have to work harder to satisfy further desires. And if you fail there, your unhappiness rises further. So all the desires, whatever they may be, they will lead ultimately to unhappiness, because they do not stop at one point. They keep giving birth to new and new desires. I know people who were looking for a bicycle and then they got a bicycle, and then they were looking for a scooter, they got a scooter, and then they were looking for a motorbike, they got a wonderful motorbike. Then they were looking for a car, they got a car. Now they're looking for a bigger car, and then they're looking for a helicopter, and then they're looking for an aircraft of their own. So you see, these desires keep rising. They ultimately lead you to distress. So this is one factor which is causing ashanti, which is causing distress in our life. Desires. We have to, some stage, get rid of them. That is one. The second factor, which is very important, is to go against the nature. We are just talking about the natural disasters. Nature has its own flow. It has a flow of, it actually guides the flow of life. For example, now in Rajasthan, the winter is coming. So you have to wear somewhat, heavier clothes, woolen clothes, to protect yourself. And if you want to be very brave and fight the nature that I don't want to wear woolen clothes now, you will fall sick and you will invite distress. So you are going against the laws of nature. The law of nature is, for example, a fruit from the tree will fall down. That is the law of nature. That is what we call force of gravity. Now, if you want to go up in the sky, naturally you will fall down because the law of nature tells us that gravity will pull you down. So it will hurt you if you are, as long as you do things against the laws of nature. Like if you want to swim against the current of a river, the river is flowing toward the ocean downwards, it's very easy to swim with the river. But if you want to go up in the hills where the river originates and swim there, you will be completely destroyed, or you will be ruined, or you will hurt yourself, or you will be dead. So this is what we cannot fight against nature. The nature is designed to help us, to make us live in this world, to give us the power of nurturing and sustenance, to actually give us the life. So therefore, we have to live with the laws of nature. It is similar like in a country we have laws, criminal laws and civil laws and constitution. Now those people who go against those laws, you are supposed to drive on the left side of the road and you start driving on the right side of the road. So you are violating the laws. You are firstly, imperiling your own life. Your own life could be at stake. Secondly, you are violating the law and therefore you could be prosecuted. So same way, the nature has its laws. We should understand the laws of the nature and follow those laws. If we follow the laws of the nature, we will maintain our peace, we will maintain our harmony, we will have a smooth sailing in the world. But if you go against the nature, if you start conquering the nature, if you believe in conquest of nature, then you will invite unhappiness, you will invite distress for yourself. So that is the second important part in which we invite distress for ourselves. Desires is the one, and second is not following the law of the nature, going against the laws of the nature. Now the third is, you see, this is what has been emphasized in Bhagavad Gita many occasions, that the nature is governed by three gunas, Sat, Raj and Tam. And because our body is made of nature, the same five elements make the nature and same five great elements make our body. That is the space, air, fire, water and earth. These five elements have an ingredient of three gunas, Sat, Raj and Tam. And therefore we also have those three gunas in our body. Those three gunas are part of our system. And so long as we continue to remain under the influence of these three gunas, we will keep inviting distress. That is why there is a word called gunatit. If you really want to have anand, if you really want to have eternal peace, then you have to rise beyond the three gunas. You have to rise even beyond the satgun. We discussed these gunas in the past, but we will discuss them again. Tamogun, Rajogun and Satgun. Tamogun basically is darkness, it's lack of knowledge. It's completely not only lack of knowledge, but also accompanied with arrogance. Lack of knowledge and then arrogance put together. That is what is Tamogun. And Rajogun is primarily, driving you to do something. and in return expecting some reward. Like you pursue a business, pursue a politics. Now all these things are driven by Rajogun. You do activities and then you expect a reward proportionate or even higher than what you put in your efforts. And then Satogun is the balance between the two of them, that you of course expect reward, but you can't keep expecting reward beyond a proportion, or you can't go beyond a proportion. So it's a sort of balancing the brake and the accelerator, and you maintain a speed. So that is Satogun. But these gunas are still part of nature and they keep directing you in life. Now we have to rise beyond that. The third part of spiritual path. The first is to get out of the desires to the extent possible. And if you can, overcome desires, complete that best. Second is to follow the laws of nature. And third is to uh, overcome these gunas. Now that is the most difficult part. It's easier to do the second one. You can follow the path of nature. That is easier. Even to overcome desires completely is not that difficult. Once you realize that you are fulfilled one desire, still it didn't give you enough happiness, then again another desire, you fulfill that, it did not give you enough happiness. So you can analyze that and intellectually can feel that desires are ultimately not giving you permanent happiness. So you can get out of desires also, and you can take things as they come. But most difficult is this the trigunas, which are embedded in your system, in your body, mind, and intellect. Now, firstly, to realize them is most difficult. People don't even believe that they have all this, and then to get out of them is a very difficult process. And for that, we need uh, detailed self-analysis and then meditation over all the causes why it is happening, and then to overcome them. It's not my intention today to go over into the details of those, because we have discussed them in the past and we will have occasion to discuss them in greater detail later. But I'm just analyzing the causes which lead you to distress and unhappiness in life. The three causes which I have mentioned right now are very, very important causes. And all these causes have to be addressed in this transition of life from birth to death. It will not be possible for us to overcome all this in one birth. It may take several lifetimes, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. But if we keep rising upwards, if we keep taking one step upwards every day, then you are sure that you will reach the Mount Everest. But if you are not taking that step forward, then there is a chance that you will never reach the Mount Everest. So the process has to continue in the direction that we raise our consciousness every single day in our life. Every day we have to meditate. In every life we have to meditate, and we have to move forward in this process. So this is what I would like to emphasize today, that by understanding the insensible, invisible, intangible, we have to move in this direction. We have to move in the direction which actually raises our consciousness to a new level, and that is what has been called Kundalini in the larger sense. Kundalini is not something unusual happening in the body. It is just raising the consciousness. It's raising the energy which is stored in Muladhara to the highest level in our body, because body is like a cosmos. Body is an example or a prototype of the cosmos, from in which we have to rage as we do in other part of the world. We raise our status in prestige, we raise our wealth, we raise our social prestige and all that, or power. Similarly, we have to raise our consciousness to a new level, and from one chakra to another chakra to another chakra, and then to Sahasrara finally. So these are the steps we need to follow in this journey of spirituality, which starts from insensible and again ends up insensible. But in between we get a transition. In that period of transition, we have to realize that as human being we have this chance, and let us raise our consciousness. And raising the consciousness will ultimately lead to these three things: control our desires or getting out of the desires. Secondly, following the law of nature. And thirdly, becoming gunatit, going beyond the three modes of nature which are embedded in our system, Satra Jantam. And once we are able to do that, once we are on that path, then nothing can stop us. Then we become the universe in ourselves. Now, this is what my purpose was today, to make each one of us feel that this journey from childhood to old age should be a journey of some achievement, should be a journey where we can feel that at the age of 80, I'm better than when I was at the age of 5. That should be the approach. If you feel that at the age of 80 you are worse than age of 5, then there's no achievement in life. The achievement in life is possible only when you can say firmly to yourself that when I was a child, I was poorer. Today, at the age of 80, I am richer. And that richness comes by following this path. That is possible only through knowledge, combination of knowledge and sadhana, and working on yourself slowly to move on the path of raising your consciousness. So I think with this I will conclude this particular topic, insensible and unintelligible, because the main purpose of this was to expound on the concept that we all originate from, the insensible and unintelligible, and we go back to that, and in between we get a lifetime to raise our consciousness. That transition is very important, and that transition should be the flow of life, not flow of death. If we want to make it a flow of life, then we should be better at the end of our journey of life. We were born as a child and we are dying at the age of 80. I think that journey should give us a new level of consciousness, a new level of thinking, a new enlightenment on the mysteries of life, a new urge in our process of life to move forward. Then only our journey is in the right direction. Then only our journey is in the spiritual direction. Spirituality does not mean going to a temple and making prayers and ritual. Spirituality basically means these three things which I mentioned: to get out of the cycle of desires, to follow the path of the nature, the laws of the nature, and to become gunatit slowly, and raise your consciousness to a level where all these things become immaterial to you. So this is where we will conclude our session today, and we will move on to the Q&A session and then to meditation. Thank you very much. Yes, it's a very important test. And this is not a difficult test. If you are feeling happier every passing day, it's not a cycle of happy and unhappiness. If you are feeling happier, if you are feeling expanded, then you should feel that you're on the right path. For example, when somebody does a theft, he he actually contracts himself. He tries to hide, and his own soul becomes contracted. But when you are giving something to others, or in doing some philanthropic activity, you become expanded, you become happier. So anything which makes you expand and become happier, and if this process continues regularly, it means you are on the right path. That is the test. Of course, there would be ups and downs, but the ups and downs, the average of ups and downs should be higher average every time. Higher average towards happiness. The quotient of happiness should be higher every time. So if you feel that 5 years ago you were happy, but today you are happier than what 5 years ago was, it means you're on the right path. I think that is one most important test for evaluating the path. Good happenings and not so good happenings will not disturb you too much. They will disturb you. I'm not saying that everybody is immune to that. They will disturb, but they will not disturb you to the core. You will take them as part of the life and you will move on. So that tendency that you are gradually becoming happier and happier is the test of evaluating yourself. You also feel expanded. You will feel that you are able to talk honestly and freely. There are times when you try to hide things. When you talk to your wife, your friends, your children, there are many things we try to hide. But a stage comes when you stop those things to hide. You honestly come out and talk. But others feel it's their business. Then you are expanding. You are becoming open. You are taking the criticism in its own stride. It's not affecting your core. You see? So that is, I would say, the greatest test, that your happiness should increase, your openness should increase, your heart should expand. And ultimately, you will feel that you are getting, what you call feeling of karuna and daya. It will come. Automatically, you will feel passion, you will feel compassion for others. That feeling comes when you automatically expand and you become happier. That compassion comes from your inner core. It's not an outside thing to get some reward out of it. No, it's karuna, it's not daya. Karuna comes from inner side, from the inner core. So all these things start reflecting. Your face, you will feel even your face becomes, more, I would say, gives a light. People will feel that, your face is shining. It gives a different shine because you have expanded, your energy is oozing out, and your happiness is coming out. So I think these are the basic tests for evaluating oneself that one is on the right path or not. एक लाइफटाइम में या फ्यू लाइफटाइम्स में टू क्रॉस दिस ओशन इज नॉट पॉसिबल. अभी तो इसको अपन वो कहते हैं ना, संसार का सागर. So this Sansar Sagar is so huge and so complex that nobody can cross it in 1 or 2 lifetimes. It takes several lifetimes. And in one lifetime, if we are able to improve ourselves, for example, our consciousness level is at 30% today. If we can make it at 35% at the end of our life, I think that would be a great achievement. Because in the next birth, you will be born at 35 and then you can raise it to 40%. So that gradual process, like your companies, they don't want to jump to a highest sell on the first day. They say, okay, yearly target. We fix 5% rage in the cell, then another 10%, another 5%, another 15%. The same way, if we raise our consciousness slowly, slowly, then a day will come that we will be getting out of this concept of uni. We won't be taking birth again, then we will reach the so-called nirvana and moksha. But that will come at the fag end. Otherwise, we'll come back in this human life because this life is the only possibility which gives us a chance to improve ourselves. There's no other life where you can get this chance. As it's very clear.
जी
So
सर.
there are two ways here. You know that in Bhagavad Gita also they have used the word adhogati. Now, adhogati, in my view, doesn't mean that you go back to the life of an animal. No. Adhogati, you can be as a human being going down very deeply. There are a lot of human beings who are worse than animals. I can tell you many people whose behavior is worse than those of an animal. So that is actually an adhogati in this life itself as a human being. But we don't have to take that path. We have to take the path of Urdhgami. We rise, we go up slowly, slowly, raise our consciousness, raise our Kundalini, and from one chakra, say from Muladhar, we go to Swadhisthana, and then we go to Manipur, and then we go to Anahat. So we raise that consciousness in our body slowly, 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 so that ultimately it reaches there. But it will not be possible to do so in one lifetime. But I'm sure if we make an effort in some lifetimes, in maybe 10, 15, 20 lifetimes, we can cross this ocean of the world and we can achieve nirvana, moksha, when we don't have to think about any more yonis and any more birth. Because ultimately, you have to feel that this place where we are today, the world, sansar, is a source of distress only. It ultimately lands you up in distress. And therefore, you have to rise beyond this sansar. And that is possible only when we realize the insensible and unintelligible, which is beyond the sansar, beyond the manifested world.